Welcome back to another episode of What's Next. And a man who's no stranger to the industry and no stranger to What's Next is Dr. Angus Hay, the African Data Centers Regional Executive for South Africa. Now, good morning to you, Dr. Hay. This is an unusual one. I can see that you're out and about somewhere. You're wearing a hard hat. Where on earth are you, and why are you wearing a hard hat? Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I'm going to just walk through. I'm currently in the construction site where we're doing the expansion for our CPT1 data center in Cape Town. So the weather you're seeing in the background is a bit of Cape Town weather, but this is the expansion of our Cape Town data center, which is in Deep River, a little bit south of the city.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'm on the construction site and.
Dr. Hay, tell us a little bit about that data center that you're at the moment. It's being built. When is it going to be commissioned, and how big is it exactly?
Yeah, so this is our first data center in Cape Town. It's the one that's been here for some years, but we're doubling the size. So we're busy expanding it. It started out as about 5 megawatts, and we're doubling that size with an additional 5 megawatts of capacity. So when it will be ready?
Okay, that's
basically
that's fantastic.
By the end of the first quarter, we will be ready.
Now, just in terms of
a table, we can talk.
Yes, no, that's amazing. I mean, just in terms of context for those who don't understand, megahertz and sizes of data centers, how big is an additional 5 megahertz? I mean, in terms of racks and that sort of thing, is it something that you can quantify with a rack so that we can get an idea in our minds?
Yeah, so just to give you a rough idea, I mean, it's not exact because we actually measure in megawatts, which is power.
Yes.
But to give you a rough idea, it's 3 data halls. We're adding a couple of thousand square meters of physical, actual, what we call white space.
Right.
But at the same time, each of the halls that we're adding, each of the 3 data halls will take several hundred racks each. So we don't really measure exactly the number of racks. We tend to measure in megawatts, and that's why the 5 megawatts is the measure.
Okay, well, listen, it's amazing, and thank you for taking us briefly behind the scenes of that construction. By the way, when will that be ready and commissioned?
So we're expecting this to be on stream by the end of the first quarter.
Okay.
And going live. We're very much in the last stages of commissioning right now.
Okay.
So, there's a lot of construction that goes into building a data center, and we're very much at that last stage where we're commissioning all of the equipment.
Okay, wonderful. Listen, it's great to chat to you again, Angus. I mean, you and I go back all the way back to those days of Neotel, but you've got your African data centers hat on, and you've been doing this for several months already. And it's an interesting time, the amount of investment that you guys are putting into the market at the moment. 2023 was really an interesting year. It's come and gone. We're at the start of 2024. How was the year for Africa data centers, 2023? What was it like for you?
Yeah, so ADC already has the largest network of carrier and cloud neutral colocation data centers on the continent. So in the past year, we've seen quite strong growth. That's across our major markets. So that's Nigeria, Kenya, and of course, South Africa. And most of that growth has been deployment for new or expanding key customers. And I think particularly for us, the strongest growth we've seen is firstly the global hyperscale players, so those recognizable cloud provider names, and then financial services. We've seen a tremendous growth in financial services. It's interesting, we believe that we are unchallenged as the leader in providing outsourced colocation to financial services across Africa. So you'll know about our Samran data center, which we'd acquired, but that's very much a financial services hub. It houses banks, financial services, a number of global players. Again, we don't disclose names, so I can't tell you who, but some major financial services players in that hub. But we also have major banks in both Nairobi and also in our new facility in Lagos. So significant growth from almost a zero base in our new Lagos facility, we've got at least one major bank, and we've also got one of the major cloud providers in that new facility in Lagos.
Wow. So, I mean, you're a critical part of this backbone of not only communication and the data centers that we talk about, but the financial hub as well. You're making banks work, you're making commerce work, you're really driving the economies of many of these countries that we've spoken about, and of course your regions that you expand across are vast. So that's very, very impressive what you guys are doing, and you're certainly off to a big start for 2024. You gave us a sneak preview. Tell us, and let's unpack the big announcement of 2024, Angus.
Yeah, so there are probably going to be more than one big announcements in the year, but let's start with the big one now, which is, of course, the launch of this expanded Cape Town data center, where we're launching a new 5 megawatts of capacity. So this deployment is going to be serving multiple different kinds of customers, but it's also starting to establish this data center, this Cape Town data center, is very much a hub. Firstly, for those providers who are making use of it, but also as a hub of the internet. The colocation data centers are not just places where you put servers; they're also where the internet where you have the hubs of the internet. So this CPT1, the Cape Town data center, houses the Cape Town Internet Exchange, and it has a number of other ISPs, carriers, various other members of what we call our ecosystem inside this data center. And so that expansion of the 3 new data halls is going to make opportunities for new customers to come in, but also to expand that ecosystem so that we can expand the overall internet and cloud ecosystem in South Africa.
So really an integral part of the backbone of that internet connectivity, because those undersea cables land at a certain point in Cape Town. I imagine you can't tell us exactly where the location is, but you're pretty close to that location. And then from there, you interconnect to a whole lot of other data centers. It's almost like a spider web, if you can call it that. But adding that capacity is really, really impressive. How many square meters additionally did you say this expansion is going to add?
Yeah, so the physical data halls, all in all, is about 1,500 square meters. But let me tell you a little bit about square meters and capacity, because in the old days, you used to measure things in square meters. We're kind of a provider of real estate, and real estate you measure in square meters. But the really important parameter that we need to look at is the density.
Yes.
So how many watts or kilowatts can we get into a square meter? So with some of the new technologies we're deploying, we're on being able to double the capacity per square meter. So how many kilowatts you get into a square meter. So when you look at those square meters, they're, we're actually getting more inside the square meters than we used to. So higher density racks, higher power in each of the racks. And obviously the thing that's driving this is, what is in the racks. What's in the racks is equipment that our customers put down.
Yeah. But
our customers are deploying lots of new technologies, particularly ones that use a lot of power and a lot of processing power, like AI. So AI deployments in particular are going to use a lot of power, very high power servers, and of course that means much more density in the rack. So you get rack densities that old days used to be 1 or 2 kilowatts in a rack.
Yes.
We now talk about 10 kilowatts in a rack or more. Yeah,
that's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So you're able to do output a lot more power in terms of server power with a lot less space. And does that go back to Moore's law, where you've been doubling the capacitor, the capacitors every 18 months or so? Is that what it's all about? Is it Moore's law that's pushing the boundaries like this?
Yeah, obviously in terms of processing power, that's what happens. So, as I say, our customers are the ones that put the servers down, but ultimately somebody's manufacturing those servers. That's where you're seeing Moore's law as driving the expansion. But I think as data centers, we really globally as data centers, we are providing that that space, and of course we have to do it efficiently. So in terms of the way that we do it, this whole increasing capacities, increasing efficiencies is part of what we're all about as data centers, because we're very conscious nowadays of how much energy we're using, and also how much renewable energy we're using.
Yes. Well, I was going to get into that, because the energy is a very important aspect of that data center, because we measure data centers today in terms of how much energy they use. And we were touching now on the technologies that are being used. And it's incredible when you look at the strides that have been made just in the last 5 years, never mind the last decade. Are there any new technologies used in these data centers that will improve the value of performance even more? I mean, we touched on it very briefly, but I guess that it's almost like a recipe, right? It's not just about the chip that's inside the servers.
Oh, yes.
It's also about the energy and how you get rid of the heat and all those other kind of things.
Yeah, correct. I mentioned in passing that sometimes people think of data centers as being, like a real estate company. But, the reality is that we're a very high-tech real estate company.
Mm.
So for this new deployment in Cape Town, we're very excited that one of the new data halls, I said we're doing 3 new data halls, one of the new data halls we're building there is going to be the first deployment on the African continent of what we call fan wall technology. So you'll be familiar with the conventional data center environment where you have a raised floor and then you have air conditioning.
Yes.
and computer room air conditioners that pipe the air through the floor. I think everybody's familiar with that kind of look of a data center. When you move to fan wall technology, you're optimizing for these high density deployments with lots of power and lots of cooling. So you remove the raised floor completely, and you put a solid concrete floor. You put the rack straight onto the floor, and you build fan walls on each side. So literally, the cooling is coming out of refrigeration units on. You're literally cooling from 2 of the walls of the data center. And that essentially chills the whole hall. And then what we do is we put the racks inside pods inside the hall, inside what we call containment, and those are hot aisles. So you get the cold coming in, goes through the racks and goes out through the hot aisles. And that is significantly more efficient than the old-fashioned way of having air coming through the floor, etc. So for that hall, that's really optimized for high cooling efficiency. That's where we're getting that doubling of density of racks. And importantly, we get a very good PUE. We measure what we call power usage effectiveness in a data center.
Mm.
So this fan wall technology enables us to not only double the power density in the data hall, but we're also able to achieve a PUE of about 1.3.
Wow.
And that means that, for every one kilowatt that's going into the IT, we're only using about a third of that or less than a third of that to cool it. And so, maintaining those high efficiencies means that we're drawing less from the global grid. We're being more efficient, and we're growing the amount of processing power that can be put into that hall at the same time.
I'm trying to do.
So that's the one thing.
Just before you go, I'm just trying to do the calculations in my mind on that. So if it's a third, are you saying that you're using a third less energy, or is it 2/3 less energy to cool it down?
So compared to where data centers in South Africa and across the continent were about say 5 years ago, we've certainly dropped. We used to have PUEs. People used to quote PUEs of around 2. So yes, we are actually, for cooling, the cooling component, we're certainly using about 2/3 less energy than we used to use, which is great. That's the efficiency we've improved. And as I think the other thing is we're talking about brand new deployments. So this isn't sort of optimization. This is really new technology. And as I say, this fan wall deployment is our first on the African continent.
That's massive. Sorry, carry on. I interrupted you there, but that's very impressive.
Yeah. The other thing that we are going to be doing with CPT1 in Deep River is this is going to be the first site that will benefit from our new solar power wheeling project. So in the course of last year, we announced that we are going to sign an independent power purchase agreement with one of these independent power producers, and we're going to wheel renewable energy across the grid. So we're literally building, or at least our partner is building, a solar farm in the Free State. Literally a farm, lots of solar panels, and going to be generating about 20 megawatts of power from that solar farm. And we've put in place, and this is with the liberalization that we've seen within the power and energy sector in South Africa. We've put in place agreements which will enable us to wheel that energy from the Free State across the national grid, across Eskom's grid, and into the city of Cape Town. And then we've been working with the city of Cape Town, which, as you know, have been sort of leading the drive in terms of getting a lot of these new new power systems in place. And so the City of Cape Town, we then have an agreement we're putting in place with the City of Cape Town. Basically, once that switches on, which is going to be later in the year, we will be getting about 6 megawatts of power delivered to our Cape Town site that we have generated from our own power station.
Wow, that's very impressive. And does that, I mean, obviously that's going to power during the day when there's sun. Are you storing any of that energy as well to use for backup?
So currently we're investigating various options. I mean, I think this is the big challenge for everybody in the sector is solar is great, but what do you do when you at night? So the first things first is we're using the solar very much to start moving towards a position of carbon neutrality. So ADC has a longer term plan to move towards being carbon neutral and using only renewable energy. So the solar is step one. We've got various projects on the go in the background, which I'm sure we'll tell you about in future, about looking at options for battery storage. We've even looked into other technologies like hydrogen. So there are various other technologies that we're looking towards. But step one for us on that journey towards carbon neutrality is getting as much solar energy into the system as possible. And also, a lot of this is based around the sort of concept of creating new additional renewable energy in the system. Yeah. So if you look at the commercial models around wheeling, you don't necessarily have to use your own electrons.
Yes.
You've seen these models where you start to trade in electricity, and that's what we're starting to see. So we may, for example, be able to generate electricity using it for the day and share it with other players. But the idea is to try and get as much new renewable energy onto the grid as possible.
So Angus, if this is working optimally, and the solar farm is running at full capacity in the middle of the day, and your data center is running at full capacity, how much of the power and energy will the solar offset? Are you going to be running completely off solar at its peak efficiency?
So not 100% initially. As I said, we've got a goal over a number of years to get to that 100%. But in the initial phase, we're looking at 20 to 30% of that will now be renewable. You must understand, in South Africa, we're actually at the wrong end of that scale. So by global standards, the national grid right now in South Africa is about 85% non-renewable. It's all old sort of coal technologies and so on. So moving that needle by 20 to 30% is already very significant. But as I say, we have a longer term plan to move towards carbon neutrality, and not just in South Africa, across the continent. South Africa's, we actually, ironically, South Africa is where we have the biggest opportunities right now for renewables. But we also, have opportunities across other countries. Interestingly, Kenya's quite an interesting case, because Kenya already has a lot of renewable energy in their grid.
Yeah.
They have a lot of hydrothermal energy. They have hydro as well. So geothermal and hydro energy. So in the national grid in Kenya, where we operate one of our other major data centers, we're already about sort of 85 to 90% renewable.
That is very impressive.
Good story overall for Africa.
Yeah, no, that's very, very impressive. Well, look, what are those timelines like? Can you share with us in terms of when these data centers will be operational? Yeah. How far are you? You've been walking around there. Are you able to tell us when it's going live?
Yeah. So as I said, for this data center, it'll be about the end of Q1. So around about March, we will be ready with this data center. But maybe just to mention that we've got other projects in the pipeline. So there's an expansion going on in our JHB1 Midrand data center. We've had quite a large construction going on in Samrand. That's our JHB2 data center. So some of those are coming on stream later in the year. So there'll be more news later. I think the other thing is, in terms of technologies, maybe just to fill you in that, as I said, we're not just a physical place to put your servers. We've added a lot of new technologies over the last year, and some of these are going to be turned into products as we go forward. So one of the big ones has been the addition of our ADC fabric, and that's just a kind of a layer 2 networking environment within our data centers. But it allows us to add virtual cross connects, peering connections to internet exchanges, cloud connections, and we can do it both within and between data centers. So, for example, if you come into one of our data centers, let's say this one in Cape Town, you can come into the CPT1 ADC data center in Cape Town, but we can give you a remote port onto the NAP Africa Internet Exchange, because we have a layer 2 fabric connecting multiple different data centers within a city. And we've done that in Johannesburg as well. Interestingly, we're doing it in Lagos, both to our own data centers and in between data centers. So yeah, a lot of overlay technologies. And then I think the other technology, which is, we were talking about sort of where we innovated, is the other big thing we've done over the last year. We added a platform which we call a data center infrastructure management platform. So that's a DSIM. And we've deployed that across all of our data centers. And what it effectively does is it provides us with our basic sort of asset register of the data center. So we can manage and control those assets. We use it for planning, for maintenance, for all those sort of things. But on top of that, we have a digital twin. So we literally have a digital twin of the data center. You can do a 3D walkthrough. You can look at temperatures, humidities, power, and we can model all of that, and overlaid on that is an AI platform that enables us to optimize. So we can literally look at the airflows within a data center environment, and we can we can read that back, monitor it, and then optimize it for energy efficiency. What's even better about it is that sometime in the course of 2024, we're going to be launching what we call DSIM as a service, which is providing that same view to customers.
That is absolutely amazing. That is incredible technology. You really are using everything that's available to optimize this data center and make it as high tech as possible. Anybody watching this, an interested party, how do they get in contact with you about leveraging the value of these new data halls?
Yeah, I think by now the ADC brand is probably well recognized in the market. I know it's taken us a couple of years to kind of get up to being recognized. But I think, go to africadatacenters.com, our website, get hold of us. As I said, in South Africa, this facility in Cape Town is great. It's being expanded with the latest technology, but we also have the 2 big data centers in the Greater Gauteng area in Samrand and Midrand. And then, lastly, we do have plans for an expansion in Cape Town, our CPT2 data center in Atlantic Hills. That's probably going to only really come on stream in 2025. But I think, we've become experts at running world-class data centers that are optimized for hyperscale, for these large financial services, at the same time, literally, as running a construction site on the same premises, building these new facilities.
Amazing stuff.
So yeah, certainly anybody, the easiest way, find us on our website. Yeah.
And finally, I know you've been teasing us on the plans for 2024. And some you can share, some you can't share. What are you most excited about 2024 that you're working on that you can tell us about?
Yeah, so I think, in addition to what I've mentioned already, what's coming on stream here, just to give you the bigger picture of Africa data centers, we've got expansion which is underway already in Nairobi. So apart from Cape Town and Joburg, that's both Midrand and Samrand, we also have construction happening in Nairobi at our Nairobi data center, which is it's already, I think, well known as the hub of East Africa for the internet and co-location. As I mentioned, our Lagos facility, tremendous growth from a low base there, but we believe that we've already got a significant percentage of the market in Nigeria from that initial launch. So good growth there, and expansion projects. And then there's a longer term plan. So apart from this technology that I've told you about, our actual geographic expansion, we've bought land in Accra in Ghana. We've bought land in Kigali in Rwanda. We've bought land in Casablanca in Morocco. And these are all parts of the longer term plan for the rollout of data centers. At the moment, we're physically constructing more actual data center white space than we already operate.
Sure.
So certainly within the next 2 to 3 years, we are going to double or more the size of ADC across the continent.
That is so exciting, and at the same time improving these efficiencies. I mean, you just don't even know what's going to be coming up in the next 3 years, how things will improve in terms of cooling and power output, et cetera, et cetera. And then just a final question, Dr. Hay. I know you mentioned AI and the impact that has on data centers, and I often ask the question is, with AI just becoming increasingly more profound in our lives, and we're using it that more. Most people don't realize that we're using AI in our day-to-day lives, but the impact that has on a data center is quite immense. In some cases, it uses 5 times more energy to push out results versus how we did things in the past. And I guess that one can't really predict how fast AI is going to grow. And when you look at generative AI as well going into the future, is that something that you guys can actually quantify and predict how much of your data center's capacity it's going to start using in the future?
So I'm not sure we can put a number to it either, but I can tell you that the growth that we see as a consequence of that is exponential. So we see in the core markets globally, maybe just to kind of put it in perspective, ADC is not competing in a small local market. I mean, we are part of a global market for data centers. We're seeing global players that are competing even on the African continent. And so some of those, really big markets, we're seeing massive, massive growth. Interesting thing is that the real constraint, as we see it, so I mean, yes, this exponential growth, you can look at some of the numbers published by even the cloud providers showing just how much growth they're seeing, in the next couple of years, doubling the amount of capacity they might need. But certainly what we're seeing is that that's got to be balanced against the constraint of energy. So, we often talk about energy constraints in South Africa. In some of the biggest markets in the world, they can't get power anymore because they've kind of stretched the grid to its limit. And so, we have a huge opportunity in African markets, not only being one of the leaders and one of the first into the market, but also this whole idea of being able to take new technologies, so energy efficient technologies, and taking new technologies to be able to deploy, the data centers to these new technologies and really kind of leapfrog where some of the older data centers were in the world. But as I say, we certainly see those kind of growth rates across the markets we are in, and no doubt AI is driving part of that. Because we have a lot of customers, we have hundreds of customers across our data centers. We can't necessarily pinpoint exactly who's driving what, but we see it in orders. So we see it in the amount of megawatts we have to sell. We see it in the amount of racks that need to be deployed, and just these doubling the size of the Cape Town data center. Our deployment in Midrand as well, in the course of this year, is also going to double the size of the Midrand facility. So that's the kind of growth rates we're seeing.
Extraordinary stuff. It's always good to chat to you. I learned so many new things, Dr. Angus Hay. Thank you for your time. And Dr. Angus Hay is the African Data Centers Regional Executive for South Africa, sharing those exciting insights and taking us live in Cape Town, where their latest development is taking place. Dr. Hay, thank you, as always, for your time.
Great. Thanks. Great to speak to you, Aki.
Thank you.